Every filmmaker has an origin story, and Shasha's began not with a camera, but with bush, books, and her grandmother's contradictions. Today, we'll walk with her through those beginnings, the fire of her purpose, and the stories she tells to make sense of the world. Sasha Gay Lewis is a Jamaican filmmaker, director, and producer living in the US, whose work has already left a mark on audiences and on history. Sasha, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right, Sasha, let's get a quick rundown of who Sasha Gay Lewis is. In your own words.
My name is Sasha Gay Lewis. I am an Emmy-nominated producer, writer, and an award-winning Jamaican filmmaker who has been producing and directing for over 15 years, initially working in TV and then moving into film. My producing credits, I have produced works for BT, MTV, HBO, PBS, ESPN, and directing, I directed the award-winning documentary, The Incursion.
So you've called the bush your first family, but every child grows into choices. From debate, stages to film school, your voice didn't just appear, it evolved. Let's start there. Let's begin in the bush. You said that as a shy child in rural Jamaica, the bush became your first screening. How did that sequence, with leafy audience, the goats, the trees, shape your early sense of storytelling?
That's such a good question. I think initially when I would go to the bush, it was more of an escape because, I grew up in an abusive home. And so, but it was like, cutesy abuse publicly. We were the family, we were known, when you met my parents publicly, it was just a completely different peoples than in private. And so, a lot of times I would run to the bush because that's where I would feel safe. That's where I would have quiet. That's where I would be able to process my emotions and thoughts, because that's the space where I felt like you could scream, you could shout, you could cry, and, there wasn't any judgment. And I think it initially started like that, almost in a way before there was an external audience. I was my own audience, and I was the movie in a way, going through all these emotions. And then I got to a point where there is this beautiful thing that happens in nature in the sense of how it centers you, because the quiet allows you to now really be present and recognize where you are, what is not of you from what is of you. And then I started listening to the trees. And I know it sounds weird, but it shouldn't be, because I'm sure there's a huge tree hugger community and people who have studied the impacts of nature. But I started listening to the trees, and because I was also this imaginative kid, I wasn't an only child, but I was the weird one in the family. I was the black sheep. So in many ways, I felt like I was the only child because nobody understood, why is she always in her books? Why is she always locked up in her room? Why does she listen to all these weird music? Because those times I was in alternative. I didn't go punk rock, but I was the emo spectrum as it relates to music, because I just needed an outlet for my emotions when I couldn't let them out publicly. And so it started out when I was in the bush because I felt so safe there. It gave me this opportunity to just start embodying my creativity more, because it was like this space that was free from judgment, right? It was my world and I was like in it, making it up. And then, you know, being there and just like having these stories, and then I would do make believe, just like how in Jamaica we play Dolly House. I would do it in the bush, like, you know, with the different trees and stuff and the stones and the sticks, you know, and I never felt crazy. And, you know, like I know people probably said like, oh, she's crazy, but I never felt crazy. I felt peaceful. I felt safe. I felt like, you know, there was a flow there, and that was what I needed. And even looking back at that time now, you know, I'm able to see that there is, irrespective of what I go through in life, there is something in me that like is always pushing me or like lets me know what I need in the moments, even if it doesn't look like anything anybody thinks I need. So yeah. I don't know if that answer your question, but like that's how the bush thing came about.
Oh, yes, it is. Adam answered my question a lot. Really dive deeply, and I never knew it was going to be so. Well, I shouldn't be surprised because I myself, when I became a harper, it was because of back pain and a bunch of other depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. I guess it's not surprising, especially being a Jamaican, that there was some type of abuse because I think our parents at this, certain things they grew up with, they don't even realize that they were abusing us and did not need to approach life like that. But I can definitely understand you finding solace in the bush because most of the time I find my solace when I'm alone. I'm quite, especially like in the AM when we're just at such a peace, I can actually hear my thoughts. Actually, as you say, the creative person that you are. And I think it takes, when you mention about the weird music, it takes me back as well because I've listened to some weird music. Technically, I'm open to most music. I'll at least listen to once. And I can remember my aunts feel like, what kind of weird music you listen? What kind of language? And they feel like it's some, devil worshiping music.
Right.
When it's just another language, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I got that. I got like, you know, because my family is also Christian, you know, in the sense that my grandmother is Christian. My mother was of the world, you know, and I think like the disappointment with my mom, she tried to like make up for it with me, right? So the fact that my mom didn't like take the church path, she tried to like make like it's almost like I was her second chance with my mom, and that created a lot of issues too between my grandmother because it almost, there were times it felt like, well, I'm not my mom, like I'm me, you know, and if I, you know, this is a part that I also have to choose for myself. And like sometimes I think in Jamaica we also have to be mindful of that with our kids, like being able to see our kids for who they are and not like look at them as like a second chance to like, you know, get the kid that they didn't get through the grandkids. And also to your point, like the abuse, it's so weird because like, I think like now that I'm older, I'm able to, or I have the courage to talk about the abuse more, not necessarily because, yeah, when I was younger, it was just a no, you don't you don't tell what's happening inside the home. And that's very much a Jamaican thing as well. But it was also, I think predominantly for me, I didn't want for that to be the first thing that people met or saw about me. And I've always been very intentional about that, like wanting people to meet me, Sasha, for who I am and not like all these other things that I have gone through or overcome or experienced. Because while those things are important, for me, like those are the things that I felt like I was always like fighting again so that they would not dilute who I am, right? Or they would not shift or change who I am. I think like I've always been fighting to exist in the complexity and the nuance of who I am. in spaces that have often tried to like squish me and put me in a particular box or change me into something that I'm not to make it comfortable for them. And I think like, that is like the through thread. The older I get, because I feel like, with experience, I get a little bit stronger. Like I realize that, the life is not a this or that, it's a this and that. So like two things can be true. And that is also okay. So I think like I'm at a phase in my life where I'm like more open to like talking about the abuse publicly. And it was also, I'm the kind of person who I'm always trying to understand people. Like, why do they do the things they do? Like, why do they say the things they say? And so like, it means that like I tend to reserve judgment. So it was a lot of therapy for me to realize that like, you know, when things happen to me or bad things, like it's okay to like say they were bad and mourn that without like firstly trying to go understand them, because I used to do that for the majority of my life. Like it would be like somebody hurt me and I'm trying to understand, oh my God, like why would you do that, or who hurt you while you're hurting me, because hurting people hurt people. And I understood that fundamentally, and so I spent a lot of time, and in a way, it has helped me in my work, where like even the villain, I'm interested in knowing their story, because I'm just like, how did you become this? And I think through my own personal therapy, I've been able to kind of allow space in that for me to like also recognize that, yeah, you don't have, your first response doesn't have to be trying to understand why somebody harmed you. It's okay to feel the hurt. It's okay to be upset and angry by it. It's okay to acknowledge that it has shifted you, and that is okay, and that is not a weakness. Because even though you have this gift, and it is a gift, because like when I look back at my life and the things I've been through, sometimes I'm in awe of how I have this capacity to really still hold space for people. And I know it's God, like it's not me, because like some of the things I have a righteous anger around. And I feel like if it wasn't God, I would have probably like blown up some shit and killed some people. And so, for me, it's always like, God, what is your purpose and what is your calling for me? Like, I want to do that. I never want to stray away from that. So even if situations are hard or I don't understand, my first response is always, please use me. Like, use me, help me, to be of help to somebody else. Because I became super aware and conscious of like not trying to pass on the hurt that I receive to other people, because I wanted to break that cycle. I was just like, this ain't gonna be me. Like, I'm sorry that these things happen to you, like as it relates to both my parents, but I'm just like, it shouldn't have, I don't know all the details, but it shouldn't happen. It's not my responsibility. What is my responsibility is like, I'm not going to continue this. And it would be later in my life, about 3 years ago, that I'd met this psychologist called Dr. Marielle Bouquet. She has this book called Breaking the Cycle, where she talks about intergenerational trauma, and she talks about cycle breakers, that I was able to have the knowledge, the language of like what I was doing even then as a kid, but I didn't know that that was what it was. And I also want to say something with the bush. So I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather was my favorite person in the world, and he was a farmer. So he would take me to bush. We're going to bush. We're going to the bird bush. So, I would go catch birds with him in the country. I'm from a small rural farming community, Yorkton St. Catherine, which is on your way to Ocherius before the highway. And so he would take me bird hunting with him, where we would set the traps and like wait in the bush for the birds. And like that time we would have all these conversations, and my grandfather was just, they used to call him the mayor in Yorkton. Everybody knew him. He was just this jovial man, had this positive light and energy with him. I was a girl. He never treated me along gender lines. Like, he would treat me like a boy, like, very like I was tomboy, because it was just like, he's like, yo, come with me, and throw me over his shoulder, and like it was just me and him through and through, and so that's where even like my fascination for the bush came up, because he was a coffee farmer, he did orange, and he also did yams. And so like, I would always be in the bush with him, and he loved catching birds. And so like, that's even why my first company was called Bird Bush Bungalow, because, it was like Bird Bush, like an ode to my grandfather, and that just joyful time of like going to the bush with my granddad.
That was quite a lot, Sasha. I can see that you're very good at storytelling. I would expect you to be, since you're a director, yeah, producer, and so forth. But that's the first thing that's caught my ear, and not just about the abuse that you've endured in your youth. You show that you're very good at storytelling, and it's been very captivating. I was sitting here wondering, how can I follow up with all that you said? But it's a good thing. This interview is about you and not about me. And I now realize that, I guess this is also one reason you might actually know my sister, since, your grandparents were from your town area, and we were living like in North and Sweden and so forth.
Yeah, I know. I met your sister at San Diego High School, because as you know, she went to San Diego High School. She was ahead of me, and she also, or your family comes from Lloydersville, which is just like, a little bit above your town. And so like, usually or typically at that time in Jamaica, when you came from that part of the country, you get to know each other, because you're either like, meeting each other while traveling to school or leaving school. And so that's how I met your sister at San Diego High School. We hit it off. We had a lot of similarities as two country girls, with these particular dreams. We love to dance. Like, your sister has this way of being able to fully enjoy herself and just, be present in life. And I think we connected in that way. And so, yeah.
I think I might be the black sheep in the family. While I'm not as much like her, I'm a bit more quiet. I can dance, but I choose my time, But yes, that's insightful. And you answered even several of my next questions, including about the bird bush bungalow. But in any case, from Bird Bush Bungalow Films to Phoenix Pictures, what's that heart been like? I mean, it's your first fledgling company in the bush, and our female-led production house based in New York. What threads of continuity or transformation do you trace between those two words?
I think my companies are a reflection, or like what I try to do is embed in the DNA of my company, almost like a representation of like who I am, or, like the things that shape to me, almost as a reminder to myself of like the origins of the work, so that I'll never forget either the origins of the work or, the impact of the work and what I want the work to do. So like, as I stated, Bird Bush, because of my grandfather, and also like it's in the bush that this started for me. and also what the bush symbolize in terms of, as I said, that safe space that you could be who you are, you could listen to your thoughts, you could be creative. And, so those are the through lines. The transformation is just like, I mean, I think it's obvious in the name, right? From the bird bush to a phoenix, like, and a phoenix is a type of bird that pretty much like, rises from the ashes, like it regenerates itself, like it will, it will kind of just sets itself on fire and start anew again. And I think like, when I created that second company, because my first company, I had a I had a partner and we separated. And so like I dissolved the company and started anew. And I think during that time, there was a lot of shifts that I was going through personally and professionally that like, it almost felt like I was going through the fire. And the phoenix felt very symbolic when I sat down during that time to just assess my entire life, like my entire journey, professional and personal. And the thing that came to me was the phoenix, that idea of being a phoenix and how it really represents, it feels like a symbol of like my life and who I am. And so I was just like, going into the next chapter, like this is a name that feels right for like what I embody and what I would want to do with my work, which is to help people rise from the ashes of their lives, to help people use storytelling to, give them a voice, and for people to be able to look at their life in the fullness of what it is, to know that like sometimes the burning is not punishment, but it's purification, and so like that's what it stands for. And it is so funny because like I think sometimes I've been in situations where people like, oh, your company is Phoenix. Oh, interesting name. Why? And I always smile because I'm just like, it's clear to me that there's something about the name that instantly, people are either like wanting to understand and know more about. And just that ability to rise again, like, I do those things to be, even as much as they're a public representation, it's also to remind myself, like, I'm one of those people where I look at like memory is important to me, not in a way to like keep you in a loop, but as a way as when I was at UWI, I started a minor in literature because, outside of being a storyteller, I wanted to be an author. And I studied poetry because that is how it started for me. And I remember I was playing around with this idea of memory and the idea of remember, but like, kind of separating the words and like, how looking at remember as how do we remember ourselves. And I think like that is still a principle that I have in my life of just like making sure that I never forget, who I am, which sometimes is hard in this world that is filled with so much distraction. You lose sight of it. And so I think I have embedded these little things that I know is there whenever I lose my way, to be able to just like remember and just not lose sight of like one, the calling, what God is trying to do, and the gifts. Because what I do is a gift. Like it's not about the accolades or like, the fame or any of those. It's an opportunity to be able to be used by God to help people, help themselves, because I'm a fan of Maya Angelou and that, you know, her famous quote of there's no greater agony than having to carry an untold story. And the truth is, story has been there since the beginning of time. You know, if you are religious, the Bible is a book of stories. Story connects us. Story creates community. Story allows us to be seen. Story helps us to understand ourselves and each other. Like there's power in it, you know, and it is something that God gifted us, you know, and I think like we need to get back to the heart of story. Like a lot of my work is about being like a griot of just trying to like create this space that, you know, is ancestral of us like, you know, coming around the fire and just talking to each other and just, you know, being vulnerable and being able to unload and unburden, because like that is how we survive. Like, you know, it's not just this capitalistic thing that, oh, you know, we're just doing for entertainment for you to escape. It's so much more than that, you know, in terms of its power to heal you and to allow you to unburden so that you can move through life, because overwhelm is like this quiet, insidious thing that really, you know, is stifling a lot of us in this life. And it's compounded by when we don't have safe spaces or safe people to go and talk about what we're going through, you know, and we see that now. Like where are the safe spaces? I'm not sure where they are. And just like, how do we bring back story in even filmmaking where it's not just like, you know, just these like popping visuals and all of these elements that, but it's empty because you feel the emptiness in it, you know? And so, yeah, I think I went off of your question, but like, those are just some of the things that like, you know, I think about and, you know, try to use as a guide with me in my work and try to be mindful of as I do this work.
That's no problem. In a sense, you've become the bird you used to chase to catch, risen to higher heights, or rather soaring to higher heights. So being a kid rescued by books and the radio, and then suddenly you're a Carrie Mark on stage in the newsroom, and then pursuing your MFA in documentary filmmaking in New York. That arc isn't linear, it's layered. I'd love to hear what connected all those chapters. Like, you were a quiet kid, right? Rescued by the book. And later you lead into debates, dance, and cultural shows. How did those early mediums help you find or create your voice?
I was a quiet kid, but I would say it was more because I was and I'm an observer, you know, and I think like the difference is like when I am in spaces that I feel safe, the quiet goes and I embody like my voice. So with debating, that was, you know, going to San Diego, and my lit teacher knew that I loved words and language and that like, you know, how I saw things and argue things was different. And because she fed that for me, it, she would always be trying to put me into things that would allow me to express that more. And so that's how debating came about and gravitating towards that space. Dance, as my parents tell it, I kind of came out of the womb dancing. So it was more of, and it's so funny because like, you know, when you're a kid, like at least for me, I was just like doing the things that fed me. Like if I felt like here, I felt like I was learning something because I was a curious kid too, you know, and it felt good. Like, okay, that is what I would do. And like dancing, when I dance, I feel free. Like, that's the thing about dancing. It's just, it is freedom. And so like, and I didn't know, again, it's later in life when I realized like the power of movement to heal yourself. Because in a way it was similar to like, the silence in the bush. I dance, I shut out the world, I shut out everybody. And I'm able to be present to myself, present to my emotions. And I'm able to dance it out, like really and truly. Like when I'm done, I'm lighter. And so like that's how these things are all connected, from the bush to the books to the dancing to the radio to storytelling. Like it's all the same for me, to be honest with you. Radio, I remember when I discovered radio, it was like a fire got lit inside of me, because it was the space that allowed me, as the shy person, right, where I didn't have to, be on TV, but you knew my voice, but I had the separation where you didn't know who I was. I could still exist, and you like hear people talking about me and them not knowing that it is actually me. And so it gave me the privacy because of my shyness, and also the space to like be the storyteller. And I mean, I took to radio like fish in water. Like I soared in that space. I am an award-winning radio producer, writer. I won, a major radio award when I was a student at Carmack at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. And I was one of the few students in Carmack that did like 2 major radio documentaries as a fulfillment of my bachelor's degree that they still have to this day in the library, because the work, according to them, was so good, and it was, I think people saw like I had an ability for radio. And so a lot of like my classmates would come to me and I would help them on their projects, get it to be made. When I was around the board, like, in the studio, again, it was just me and the board and, people's voices and stories. And I'm just at peace in those kinds of spaces. And so you would see the natural transition into film, because yes, film is a lot more public, but when you're in production, but then when you get to post, it is just you, your editing bay, your editor, and the stories again, and like, again, those are my Zen spaces, my spaces of like, where I get in flow and I'm able to do my best work. And all of that is also undergirded by like just a love for people, of just like this curiosity of trying to just understand people. So when I'm on set or when I'm in the studio, like that's the driving force. Like I'm curious and want to know, like, who are you? Like, what's your story? Like, tell me about your life. So yeah.
That is insightful. I remember I actually did a course with a broadcasting place back in Trinidad. It was a TV shot podcast. The TV side was more towards they use anchor type, so a bit more rigid. And I had some classmates there that also did a radio. And the stories that they tell me, basically what they have to go through, and all about that shy person that you are, you have to literally is trying to mold you out of it, and the exercise that they have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm an ambivert, really, in the sense that like I'm the type of person where I need to have my alone space. I can't be on 100%. And it's just that there are certain spaces that fuels me rather than drains me. And whenever I encounter those spaces, then I kind of transform into, or that side of me, like, is what shows up. I'm very much that, like, I run the joke that, if you talk to 10 people and they give you 10 different stories about who I am, believe them, because it just means that like and understand that that is reflective of the relationship I have with them. Because you are gonna see the difference when my friends that I've had for over 15 years, because they get to like see all the layers of me versus somebody that I just meet. Like you're not gonna get.
Let's take a quick break to revisit one of my favorite conversations this season. My sit down with Jamaican Jerry Mills, co-founder of Power Banda and the creator of Waru Pan. You see, Power Banda isn't just a fashion brand, it's a global lifestyle movement built on the idea that the only race is the human race. Their Japanese motto means all people are the same. Reminds us that style can carry meaning and that creativity can connect cultures. Their signature character, Warupan, is an anti-hero panda with attitude, part comic, part conscience, and a mission for harmony between humans and animals. You'll find Warupan featured across the apparel, bucket hats, accessories, and even limited edition figurines. Power Banda also collaborates with artists worldwide, including a standout capsule collection honoring reggae legend Eris Aman in 2023. You can explore their world at powerbanda.com and follow them on social media, Instagram at Welcome to Power Banda and at Warupan Official, Facebook Warupan. And if you haven't heard that episode yet, it's first a listen. We talk about building a brand that wears its philosophy on its sleeves, literally. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
I was saying sometimes that I think, you know, part of the work I feel like as an individual is like when you are a child, there are certain things that you have to deal with. A lot of things are not in your control, right? So, you know, decisions are made for you, experiences are given to you, and the resulting impacts of that, like, you're not in control. But when you become an adult, like, you're now in control and you decide. And I think sometimes as kids, the environment you are in shapes who you are before you're able to even define who you are for yourself. And sometimes part of the work is when you get to be an adult is to be able to like take off all the stuff that you inherited or that was like put on you so that you can meet you for you. And that's not easy work, you know, and a lot of us don't desire to do that work. You know, we come to conclusions about who we are based on like what has already been, you know, molded or put into. I've started from you were a kid. Like people rarely like try to when they're adult to like say like, you know, are these really my beliefs? Like, is this who I am? Is this what I really want? You know, because it's just, I know, like, I'm told that this is who I am and this is what I want. Well, I guess that's what I want. And a lot of us, like, believe that. But I do genuinely think that part of the work is to be able to do that internal self-work, self-assessment, build your self-awareness so you can know who you are for yourself, not for your mother, your sister, your brother, your partner, the world, but for yourself, because that makes so much of a difference when you know for yourself. And I say that because like, I can be shy. I am shy, but I'm also not shy, right? Like it's almost like, which is why I say like that idea of that idea of in the betwixt, like I am both these things. Like my grandmother was a Christian. My mother was of the world. I grew up in the in-between of these seemingly opposing realities. And what I learned from both of those things is that like these two things can be true at the same time. So like I don't have to be one or the other. Like I can take from each what, works for me and create a new, and so I think like even in my work, that's like part of it, of letting people know like this is what you went through and like it's not for you to like carry the shame of like what you went through, but is to also like alchemize your pain into your power. Understand like these things, even though they don't always feel like it, are like giftings that like helps you to have a different experience and to move through life in a different way, right? It opens you up. Now, some things open you up to bad stuff, so you have to be mindful of that. And again, that comes with the self-awareness and the self-assessment. But also, like, some things just allow you to be able to, it opens you up to people and opportunities and open you up to yourself. Sometimes a breakdown is a breakthrough. Sometimes, like what broke your heart opened you up to yourself, those kinds of things.
Completely understand.
Let's be clear. I'm not the person who's just like, yeah, like go through to life and go through the pain. Like, I wish we never had to. Like, shit. Some things I've been through, I'm just like, God, I could have done without that. Thank you. Like, that never needed to have happened. So like, I still have my own struggle with that, of just like trying, cause here's the thing. There are some things that will happen to you that just don't make any sense. There's no messaging. It was just cruel. Like that's all it is. There's no, you should learn a thing, or not everything that happens like has like, it was done to teach you something. It was just cruel and it was never supposed to happen. And I think like our ability to have more of those conversations is what we need, because a lot of times like we shame people, of just like having natural emotions around stuff. And, a lot of times we put the responsibility and the accountability on like the person who have been harmed than the person who did the harm. And we need to stop doing that as a society. We see it across the board. We see it, in like domestic violence situation where it's just like, oh, why did you stay? Like, and it's just like all of these questions around like, the partner who is being victimized and not the person who is doing the victimizing, right? We see it sometimes when it comes on to child abuse, of just like, oh, this kid was just a precocious kid. Like, you never know your place, and like, oh, why did you dress like that? And it's like, it's always their fault. Like, it is just like, no, like, that is destructive thinking, And so like, I too, like, absolutely, like, wish, like, bad things didn't happen, because some of them are just not justifiable. It is just cruel and wrong.
That is very true. I should have also had that. Not everything, as I said, not everything needs to be experienced. You can witness what others have been through.
Yeah.
And don't need to go through. You can realize that is not right for you. It's not even right for anybody. And do the correct thing and not let others experience it or yourself experience.
Yeah, I agree.
And that concludes part 1 of 3 with our interview with Sasha Gay Lewis. And now for this week's poem, entitled Candescent Desire. Sun baked from her candescent eyes, a wistful wish, a wish to stroke the flames, with a kiss on her red cherry lips, each stroke sun baked from a glistening stare, fingers running through her hair, to only be interrupted by a hammering heart. Sun-baked skin glowed with her iridescent gaze, spellbound by her silent songs of allure, enthralled by the abscess that is her. And for my other socials, you can check out my website at www.jd-morgan.com and Instagram page with handle j.d.morgan morgan_writes, as well as on Facebook. You could search for the profile j.d. Morgan, and I am also on TikTok as j.d.morgan_writes. And if you read my book, kindly go to Goodreads and search for my author name or the book itself and give a review, a very honest review. Thank you. This has been Adventures of a Wallflower, where silence gets loud. I'm JD Morgan. Until next time, keep growing, keep becoming.